Tabitha Matthews did not come back to Fromville because she failed to escape. She came back because the town needed her to return. And that changes the meaning of almost everything we have seen from her. Because Tabitha is not simply another victim trapped inside this nightmare. She may be the one person the town cannot completely control. Think about what happened. Tabitha actually got out. She reached the lighthouse. She was pushed from the tower. And somehow, instead of dying, she woke up in the real world. For the first time, someone had broken the rules. But then something happened that should have been impossible. She found Victor's father. She discovered Henry. She discovered the connection between the people who had been trapped before. And then she came back. That is the part we should be questioning. Not how Tabitha returned, but why the town allowed her to return. Because if Fromville is just a place that traps people, Tabitha's escape should have been the biggest failure in its history. Instead, her return became the beginning of the most important revelations in the entire story. And this is where it gets darker. Tabitha did not return with nothing. She returned with information. She returned with Henry. She returned with knowledge about Miranda. And most importantly, she returned with the ability to connect the present version of herself to the people who came before her. Season 4 makes that connection even more important. The official season description itself places Jade and Tabitha's revelation at the center of the story and asks whether that revelation could finally be the key to going home. But here's what changes everything. What if going home was never Tabitha's original mission? What if returning was? Because look at the pattern. The people trapped in Fromville spend their lives trying to escape. Boyd wants to escape. Jade wants answers, so he can escape. Victor wants to understand what happened. Julie wants to understand the strange rules surrounding time. But Tabitha's story is different. She gets outside. And instead of staying outside, she comes back carrying the missing piece of the puzzle. That cannot be treated as a simple plot twist. It is a pattern. And the show has been quietly preparing us for it. Tabitha's connection to the children is not just a tragic backstory. Season 3 revealed that her current identity is connected to Miranda and the repeating cycle surrounding the sacrificed children. Season 4 then pushes that idea further by making Tabitha and Jade's shared history central to the investigation. So, ask yourself a dangerous question. What if Tabitha has been returning for generations? Not physically, not always consciously, but spiritually. Each version of her gets closer. Each version remembers a little more. Each version fails. Then another version is born. And eventually, one version gets closer than the others. That version is Tabitha. This is why her escape in season May 2nd have been much more important than we originally thought. Everyone looked at the lighthouse as an exit. But maybe the lighthouse wasn't an exit. Maybe it was a checkpoint. A place where the cycle tests whether the person carrying the memory is finally ready. And if that person escapes before completing what they came to do, the town pulls the story back into itself. That's why Tabitha returning becomes so suspicious. She didn't simply stumble into Fromville again. She followed a chain of discoveries that led directly back to the town's history. And this is the detail everyone missed. The outside world didn't give Tabitha freedom. It gave her context. She needed to meet Henry. She needed to see the remnants of Miranda's life. She needed to understand that the woman she thought she was might only be the latest version of someone who had already tried this before. And once she understood that, she had to return. Not because she wanted to, because the mystery had finally become personal. But there's an even darker possibility. What if the town knew this would happen? What if Fromville deliberately let Tabitha escape because it knew she would eventually come back with something it needed? Think about the creatures. Think about the voices. Think about the visions. Think about how the town reacts whenever someone gets too close to the truth. Knowledge has consequences in Fromville. Jim learned that. Jade is learning it. Victor has spent decades learning it. And Tabitha may have learned the most dangerous version of that lesson. Sometimes the town doesn't stop you from discovering the truth. Sometimes it lets you discover it, because the truth itself can bring you back. That makes Tabitha's journey terrifying. Because maybe the town didn't lose Tabitha when she escaped. Maybe it sent her out. And if that's true, then her return was never a victory. It was the next stage of the trap. Look at what happens after she comes back. Her connection to the town's past becomes stronger. Her connection to Jade becomes impossible to ignore. She starts recognizing patterns that shouldn't belong to her. She begins interacting with objects and symbols connected to earlier versions of the cycle. And by season 4, Tabitha isn't just searching for a way out. She's becoming one of the people who understands why the prison exists. That distinction matters. Because escaping a prison is one thing. Understanding who built it is something completely different. And this is where the theory becomes dangerous. What if Tabitha came back for one reason? To finish what Miranda could not. Miranda failed. Christopher failed. The children remained trapped. The cycle continued. And every new incarnation was another attempt to reach the same ending. But Tabitha is different. She has something Miranda never had. She has knowledge from outside the cycle. She has experienced the impossible escape. She has seen a world beyond Fromville. And she has returned knowing that the town is not simply a physical location. It is a system, a cycle, a mechanism. And if the cycle can bring her back, then maybe the only way to destroy it is not to escape. Maybe the only way out is to break the reason she keeps returning. That is why the children matter. That is why the bottle tree matters. That is why Jade matters. And that is why Tabitha's decision to return may eventually become the most important decision anyone has made in From. Because if she really is the latest version of the woman who failed before, then the town isn't waiting for Tabitha to escape. It's waiting to see if she finally remembers what she came back to do. And if Tabitha does remember, the question won't be whether she can leave. The question will be whether Fromville survives her remembering. Because the closer Tabitha gets to the truth, the more the town seems to change around her. And in season 4, that pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The town is no longer simply trapping people. It is reacting to them. And Tabitha may be the one person whose existence is forcing it to reveal what it really is. But there's one problem. If Tabitha came back intentionally, who, or what, made sure she would return? Because the answer to that question may reveal who has actually been controlling the cycle all along. Section 2. The return was never an accident. The biggest mistake we can make with Tabitha is assuming that returning to Fromville made her a prisoner again. What if it made her something much more dangerous? A witness. Because before Tabitha escaped, she believed Fromville was a nightmare with no explanation. After she escaped, she learned something that changed the entire equation. Fromville had a history. It had survivors. It had previous versions of the same story. And most importantly, it had happened before. That means Tabitha's journey cannot be understood as one woman's attempt to get home. It has to be understood as an investigation into a cycle. And here's where everything starts connecting. Miranda saw the children. Tabitha saw the children. Miranda became obsessed with the bottle tree. Tabitha was drawn toward the same mystery. Miranda believed the children could be saved. Tabitha is now moving toward the same impossible goal. At first, that looks like reincarnation. But that may be too simple. What if reincarnation isn't the real mechanism? What if the town is searching for people who carry the same unfinished intention? That would explain something extremely strange about Tabitha. She doesn't remember being Miranda in the normal sense. She doesn't wake up one morning with a complete memory of another life. Instead, the memories come through emotion. Images, visions, instinct, recognition. A feeling that something is familiar when logically it shouldn't be. And this is important because From has repeatedly shown that memory inside the town does not behave normally. People don't simply remember facts. They experience memories as if the past is reaching into the present. That means Tabitha doesn't necessarily need to remember Miranda's entire life. She only needs to remember the mission. Save the children. Break the cycle. Finish what failed before. And suddenly her return makes sense. She wasn't brought back because she was weak. She was brought back because she was unfinished. But here's the darker possibility. What if everyone who has ever tried to save the children has been manipulated into believing they chose to do it? Think about Jade. He believes he is solving a mystery. But the more he investigates, the more the mystery seems to guide him. Victor spends decades trying to survive. Yet every road eventually brings him back toward the same secrets. Boyd discovers ways to fight the monsters. But every victory seems to unlock something worse. And Tabitha? She escapes. Then discovers the outside world contains another piece of the puzzle. Then that puzzle points directly back to Fromville. Look at what the show is actually telling us. The characters think they are moving forward, but the town may actually be moving them in a circle. That's the real horror. Not that nobody can escape, but that even escape can become part of the trap. And this completely changes the meaning of the lighthouse. We assumed the lighthouse represented freedom. But what if it represented transition? A doorway between stages of the same cycle. Tabitha goes through it. She enters the outside world. She discovers Henry. She learns about Miranda. And then the road leads her back. If that was intentional, the lighthouse was never designed to permanently release her. It was designed to move her from one part of the mystery to another. And if that's true, then we have to reconsider every supposed escape in the show. Because maybe Fromville has never been about keeping everyone physically trapped. Maybe it is about controlling what happens after they leave. That is a much more sophisticated prison. You don't need walls if the prisoner willingly walks back inside. And Tabitha may be the perfect example. But there is another detail. Why Tabitha? Why does the cycle keep connecting to her? Why does she have this particular relationship with the children? Why does her story mirror Miranda's so closely? And why does her connection to Jade matter? That last question may be the key. Because Tabitha is not operating alone. Jade has his own connection to the cycle. He sees symbols. He experiences visions. He is pulled toward the same historical mystery. And together, Tabitha and Jade represent something neither one could accomplish alone. Memory and interpretation. Tabitha feels the past. Jade tries to understand it. She recognizes. He investigates. She sees the human tragedy. He sees the structure behind it. That's why their stories keep converging. They aren't simply two people solving the same mystery. They may be two halves of the same mechanism. And this is where it gets darker. What if the town needs both of them? What if Tabitha is the one who can access the emotional memory of the cycle, while Jade is the one capable of decoding it? That would explain why the town repeatedly pushes them toward the same symbols. Because the mystery cannot be solved by brute force. It requires recognition. Someone has to remember what happened. Someone else has to understand what it means. And together, they may finally be capable of reaching the point where previous cycles failed. But there's a problem. The town has survived this before. It has dealt with people who got close. And every time someone approaches the truth, something appears to push them backward.
Fear.
Violence. Visions.
Death.
Manipulation. The monsters aren't necessarily the ultimate threat. They may simply be the enforcement system. Something else could be controlling the larger cycle. Something that doesn't need claws. Something that doesn't need to appear at night. Something that can manipulate people simply by giving them exactly what they think they want. And Tabitha's story gives us the strongest evidence for this. She wanted to go home. She got outside. But instead of finding peace, she found the truth. And the truth pulled her back. That is not how a normal escape works. That's how a design journey works. First, give the person hope. Then show them the world outside. Then reveal that the outside world contains answers. Then make those answers impossible to ignore. And finally bring them back. If Fromville is doing this deliberately, then Tabitha's return may have been the most successful trap the town has ever created. There is one final possibility that makes Tabitha's entire story far more terrifying. What if her return was not the continuation of the cycle? What if it was the beginning of the cycle's end? Because everything about Tabitha's journey points toward one disturbing idea. The town keeps bringing people back to the same mystery until someone finally understands what the previous people never could. And Tabitha may be that person. Think about the difference between Tabitha and everyone else. Most people in Fromville are trying to survive the present. Tabitha is connected to the past. That gives her a completely different role. She isn't simply asking, "How do we get out?" She's unknowingly asking a much more dangerous question. Why were we brought here in the first place? And that question changes everything. Because if Fromville is a supernatural prison, then escaping should be the solution. But if Fromville is a cycle designed around a specific event, then escape means nothing. The cycle can simply continue. Someone else will arrive. Someone else will see the tree. Someone else will encounter the monsters. Someone else will hear the voices. Someone else will become connected to the children. And eventually, someone else will become Tabitha. That is the nightmare. Not that Tabitha is trapped. That Tabitha may be replaceable, unless she can finally break the pattern. And this is where the connection between Tabitha and Miranda becomes more important than ever. Miranda didn't simply see strange things. She became obsessed with saving the children. She followed the visions. She went toward the mystery. And she died before completing whatever she believed she had to do. Tabitha appears to be walking the same road. But there is one major difference. Tabitha has already seen what happens when someone tries to leave. She knows escape is possible. And she knows escape doesn't necessarily end the nightmare. That knowledge could be the missing piece. Because the previous versions may have believed the only goal was to reach the outside. Tabitha now knows the outside isn't enough. The real goal is to understand the system itself. And that's why her return may have been necessary. She needed to see the prison from outside before she could understand how it worked from within. Think about how strange that is. The town's greatest weakness may actually be the fact that it cannot completely isolate itself from the outside world. There are records. There are people. There are connections. There are memories. There are objects. There is history. And Tabitha discovered the one thing the town may never have wanted anyone to discover. Fromville has consequences outside Fromville. That means the town is not a closed universe. It is connected to something larger. And once that connection is exposed, the rules become vulnerable. But here's what changes everything. If the town is connected to the outside world, then maybe someone outside has been connected to the town for much longer than we realize. Someone who knows what Fromville is. Someone who understands the cycle. Someone who may even know why certain people are drawn into it. And Tabitha's return could have opened that door. She didn't just bring herself back. She brought outside knowledge back with her. That makes her dangerous. And the town knows it. This may explain why the supernatural forces become increasingly aggressive whenever the characters approach certain truths. The monsters aren't simply hunting. The visions aren't simply random. The environment itself seems to respond. Almost like Fromville is a living system protecting information. And if Tabitha has returned carrying information from beyond its boundaries, then she is no longer just another resident. She is a threat to the system. That's why the central theory becomes so simple. Tabitha came back because she is the person who is supposed to finish what every previous version failed to finish. Not because she is chosen in some heroic sense. Not because she is more powerful. But because she has accumulated something the others never had. Pieces. A vision here. A memory there. A connection to Miranda. A connection to the children. A connection to Jade. A glimpse of the outside. A return to the inside. Each piece looks meaningless by itself. Together, they form a map. And maybe that's what the show has been doing with Tabitha all along. It hasn't been giving her answers. It has been giving her fragments. Because the final answer cannot simply be told to her. She has to recognize it. And that is exactly how the supernatural rules of From have always worked. The characters rarely receive direct explanations. They receive symbols, patterns, repeated images, strange encounters. Then they have to connect them. Tabitha's entire journey follows that structure. She sees something. She doesn't understand it. Later, another event gives it meaning. Then another. Then another. Until the past and present begin overlapping. And once that happens, the cycle becomes visible. That's the moment the town should fear. Because a cycle only works when the people inside it believe every repetition is a new event. But once someone recognizes the repetition, the cycle loses its greatest weapon. Confusion. And that could be why Tabitha's return matters more than her escape. Her escape gave her information. Her return gives her access. And now she is both. That combination may be exactly what the previous versions never possessed. But there is one final piece. The children. Why are they still waiting? Why do they continue appearing? Why does their suffering remain connected to the people who repeatedly enter Fromville? Because perhaps the children are not simply victims waiting to be rescued. Maybe they are the lock. And the cycle is the mechanism keeping that lock closed. If that is true, then saving the children doesn't just free them. It could destroy the entire structure that holds Fromville together. Which means Tabitha's mission is much larger than bringing a group of children home. She may have to destroy the reason the town exists. And that could explain why the town keeps trying to redirect her. Because if she reaches the children, the game changes. No more repeating. No more reincarnations. No more endless arrivals. No more people being pulled into the same nightmare. The cycle ends. And something that has survived for generations would finally die. That is why Tabitha may be the most dangerous person in Fromville. Not Boyd. Not Jade. Not even Victor. Because those people are trying to defeat the nightmare. Tabitha may be trying to end the mechanism creating it. And there is a huge difference. You can fight monsters. You can hide from monsters. You can kill monsters. But you cannot permanently defeat a system by attacking its soldiers. You have to destroy the system. And Tabitha may finally understand that. So when we look back at her escape from the lighthouse, we should stop seeing it as a miracle. Maybe it was the first stage of her transformation. The moment she stopped being just another trapped person and became someone capable of seeing the entire puzzle. Then she came back. And that may be the most important detail of all. Because she returned willingly. She returned after seeing what existed beyond the town. She returned after discovering the connection to her past. She returned after learning that other people had lived this nightmare before. And she returned anyway. That means Tabitha is no longer chasing home. She is chasing the truth. And once a character in From stops wanting to escape and starts wanting to understand, that character becomes extremely dangerous. Because the town can manipulate fear. It can manipulate hope. It can manipulate memories. But what happens when someone understands the manipulation? What happens when the prisoner realizes the prison wants them to escape? What happens when the cycle realizes that the person inside it knows it is a cycle? That's the moment the entire game can collapse. And maybe that's why Tabitha came back. Not to save herself. Not even simply to save her family. She came back because somewhere deep inside the repeating story, there is one unfinished act. One decision that was never completed. One group of children who were never truly saved. One cycle that has been allowed to repeat for far too long. And Tabitha may finally be standing at the place where that cycle can be broken. But here's the final question. If Tabitha really is the latest person repeating Miranda's unfinished mission, what happens when she finally remembers exactly what Miranda failed to do? Because if the town has spent generations making sure that memory stays buried, then the moment Tabitha remembers everything, maybe the moment Fromville finally reveals what has been hiding behind the entire nightmare.